First, while we wait for Rajdeep, so let me start with the order I see them on the screen, and I will start with Mr. Ajay Bakaya. Mr. Bakaya is a very savvy, informed, and pragmatic business leader with effective management skills. He is the managing director of Sarovar Hotels for over 25 years and has played an integral part of the magical growth story of Sarovar since its early inception. He has also spearheaded Sarovar's English-speaking Africa development with goals to replicate the India story in the continent of promise. He has also been instrumental in setting up greenfield and brownfield hotel projects from scratch. Let me now move on to Mr. Madhu Mathen from Air India. Madhu has been with Air India for a long time, and I personally know him from the time he has been here in Chennai. I hope I'm clear to everyone. Madhu is the executive director of in-flight flight services in Air India. After a 4-year stint in marketing and product management at the Bangalore-based pharmaceutical firm, Mr. Mathen joined Air India in 1992 and held key positions including regional sales manager Southern Region based in Chennai. Madhu was a regional manager Australasia based in Sydney and is widely acknowledged to be the architect of Air India's Australia operation turnaround. He has also spearheaded Air India's foray into digital marketing and was responsible for the promotion of the newly launched flights to Stockholm, Copenhagen, and Tel Aviv. Let me now move on to Mr. B. Venugopal, who is your third speaker. Venu is closely known to me for a long time. He retired as the managing director of LIC and is currently on the board of directors of State Bank of India and the National Commodities and Derivatives Exchange of India (NCDEX). He retired as the managing director of LIC of India on 31st May 2019. Skilled in life insurance marketing and administration, finance, information technology and business analytics, and team management. He has a degree in commerce and cost accounting from the University of Kerala. He is trained in marketing, finance, and information technology at the Asian Institute of Management, Manila, Philippines. Welcome all the speakers. I go on to the next speaker. Has Rajdeep joined us? Welcome Rajdeep. I'll just introduce Mr. Vikram Kapoor also. Mr. Vikram Kapoor is additional Chief Secretary with the Government of Tamil Nadu and is also Secretary Tourism and Culture with the Government of Tamil Nadu. I would like to go a little more and talk about Mr. Kapoor because he is our Tourism Secretary for the state. Mr. Kapoor was earlier the chairman of the Tamil Nadu Pollution Control Board, and although it was only for about 6 months, initiated steps to curb pollution levels caused by unsustainably high vehicle movements. He was on deputation with the Tea Board of India as an executive director for 5 years, and it was literally his cup of tea. Mr. Kapoor's innings at the Chennai Metropolitan Development Authority, CMDA, as a member secretary came right after the second master plan had been rolled out. The no-nonsense officer had to grapple with development regulations, perspectives on urban planning, demolitions, and follow-up. The master plan had envisaged a paradigm shift to public transportation as an answer to the city's cluttered roads. In Ripponhead building, which was the headquarters of the city's municipal body, it was the most eventful point in Mr. Kapoor's career. And we have great pleasure in introducing Mr. Vikram Kapoor and welcome you, sir, to the seminar. I will introduce now the moderator for today's discussion. Mr. Damodaran, who is the keynote speaker, will be joining a little later and will be introduced directly by Mr. Rajiv Sarvachai. Now, I don't have to really introduce Rajiv Sarvachai. He's known at 9 o'clock news to everyone in their living rooms. He's a senior journalist, author, columnist, and lead news anchor at India Today TV. He has more than 30 years of journalistic experience and has won several national and international awards, including the Padma Shri. His books, 2014, The Election That Changed India, and 2019, How Modi Won India, are national bestsellers. And I have to also say something which his wife Sagarika Ghosh had said about him on his 55th birthday, which was on May 24th. She said, a very happy birthday to Rajdeep, India's very own Walter Cronkite. So with that, Rajdeep, I bring you the speakers and all the panelists and audience today. We have people from all over the country watching this. Over to you, Rajdeep. Thank you.
Rajdeep. Thank you very much, Ajit. I hope you can hear me.
So, yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me at this conclave that you have, this virtual conclave. This is the new normal. And you've touched upon today a very important subject that you wish to discuss, the state of the service industry. Because let's be clear, 2020 is a year like no other for the service industry. Many companies, many industries in the service sector have suffered double-digit degrowth and are facing fresh challenges and also opportunities which we wish to explore over the next hour. So I'm going to start by asking our panelist. Madhu Mathen is a in-flight services ED of Air India. Mr. Venugopal has been a member of the board of directors of State Bank of India in the NCDX. We also have Mr. Ajay Bakaya. He's the managing director of Sarovar Hotels. And we will have Mr. Vikram Kapoor, who I met, I remember a few years ago when Chennai was underwater and he was doing a very difficult job of ensuring that the city was under control in those times of floods. And maybe we should start with the government servant because I think Mr. Kapoor can give us the perspective from the government, and then we'll come to the private sector because he is Secretary Tourism now, as to how governments are coping up with the challenges that COVID-19 and the pandemic have posed to industry, particularly industries like tourism. We'll give 8 to 10 minutes each to all our panelists to make opening remarks, and then we'll open it up to Q&A questions that many of you may have on your chat box. So please go ahead and send in your questions. But let me start with you, Mr. Kapoor, to give us your perspective as Secretary Tourism and welcome you to this conclave. Go ahead, Mr. Kapoor.
Thank you, Rajdeep. First of all, my thanks for remembering me. I still have very vivid memories of your visit to Chennai to see for yourself what we went through during those difficult times of Chennai floods. And I'm always grateful to your support in those difficult times. Coming to today's topic, actually, we all are very painfully aware that while this pandemic has hit the economy at large, it is the tourism, the hospitality sector that has really been hit the worst. There are all kind of assessments, estimates about the kind of job losses and the economic loss. But it is a fact that the sector which is the worst hit is this sector, and that it's also been realized that this sector will take the longest time perhaps to recover. Now, the world over, governments have been kind of grappling with a revival of various sectors of the economy. And we are aware that there are certain countries which have pumped in a huge amount of funds to revive the tourism and the hospitality sector, particularly those countries which rely to a large extent on tourism for their economic growth. What I see is that as far as India is concerned, there perhaps needs to be a refocus on this sector. We've looked at helping the MSME sector, and I'm told that the package that was announced by the Government of India for the revival of MSME sector has been extended to the tourism industry as well. And a lot of other measures are being taken both by the central government and the individual state governments to revive tourism. A lot of standard operating protocols have been put in place. Each state has notified these, so have we, which means as we allow hotels, as we allow various activities relating to the hospitality industry to open up, these SOPs have been put in place. Actually, coincidentally, yesterday we had a very interesting review by the Honorable Union Minister for Tourism with tourism ministers of southern states as well as those in the east and northeast. There have been a couple of initiatives by the central government. One is called Nidhi. It's an online portal where, for the first time, all hospitality units, all accommodation units, right from hotels down to homestays, everything, they are now being put on a common platform. A sort of a database is being created to facilitate tourism, to provide information to customers and to help in policy making. I'm happy to say that in Tamil Nadu, more than 1,000 such units have registered. Of course, we have a long way to go. But then the smaller states like Goa and even union territories like Chandigarh, I'm told, have practically covered all their accommodation units on registration on this portal. Likewise, the central government has launched another parallel scheme called Sathi, where the standard operating protocols have been put in place. The training has been imparted to the various employees and the various stakeholders in these tourism units. They are being assessed. So it's a subset of the registration process under the Nidhi scheme. And I'm happy to say again in Tamil Nadu, more than 200 hotel units have actually voluntarily registered under the Sathi program, which means they are now SOP compliant, at least certified to be SOP compliant. So while all these steps are being taken, the tourism sector per se has been asking for certain concessions. Various associations representing the various bodies, including hoteliers, travel agents, tour operators, in view of the fact that they have faced unprecedented loss during this lockdown, and in order to help them defray their liabilities such as salaries, wages, statutory dues, the demand has been that government and quasi-government bodies may need to either waive or at least defer the collection of statutory dues like property tax, electricity dues, and so on. I believe some states have, to some extent, provided some deferment, if not waiver. As far as Tamil Nadu is concerned, because of the critical fiscal situation, the state government has not yet given any concession with regard to deferment or a waiver of any of the statutory dues. For electricity dues, there was a deferment, but then it's not possible for the electricity boards or the municipal bodies to waive these statutory dues because they have their own fixed costs which they have to meet. And particularly during the COVID time, it's very important that because they don't have other sources of revenue. They need to be supported. State governments are in a deep fiscal distress, as you are well aware. And in fact, state governments like Tamil Nadu have been borrowing beyond their permissible limits, of course, with the special permission by the central government. They have been borrowing from the market to just keep the government going, pay salaries, and pay for the various COVID efforts. So there is very limited fiscal space available with these state governments to concede to these demands by the sector. Now, while these steps are being taken or being examined, what is, I think, required, my personal view would be to actually generate demand. And this is true for all sectors of the economy. For tourism, it is particularly tricky because expenditure on travel, on food, on hospitality comes lower down in the order of priority for any individual or any family. These days, everybody's incomes are depressed. People have lost jobs, and therefore they are trying to conserve whatever they have in terms of savings or whatever they earn. And therefore, it would be unreasonable to expect the public to actually go out and spend more in this sector. Whereas that is what is really required, because if you spend, then this industry gets a lease of life. So yesterday, when we had this meeting with the Union Tourism Minister, our Honorable Minister for Tourism had also placed a demand or a suggestion that we can think of we means the central government can think in terms of a kind of an LTC kind of a scheme for the general public. Now, LTC, as you know, is a concession available to government servants. Several private organizations provide it to their employees, which motivates them to travel once a year or once in 2 years to travel. And part of the cost in terms of the travel cost and the lodging and boarding costs are defrayed by the employer. So a suggestion is that if the government of India could come out with an innovative scheme open to the common public, where they could at least defray 50% of the cost of travel. Now, we are aware that countries like Thailand have come out with such a scheme. So similarly, if a scheme were to be set in place where, say, 50% of the cost of your travel and 50% maybe of your cost of a hotel or the boarding cost could be met through the exchequer by way of a subsidy, it would definitely kind of kickstart a demand among those people who are very fed up being locked up in their homes and would like to venture out. We are seeing very distinct patterns now in the way people are looking at tourism. The business tourism has taken a hit. A lot of people tend to now do business online the way we are doing now. So travel for business has definitely reduced. But for people who travel for leisure, I think people are avoiding to travel to congested places or where there is apprehension that there would be some kind of fear of infection. So people, I think, are looking more at locations which are off the beaten track, where standard protocols for hygiene are in place. And so I think we need to tap into that latent demand of people who want to travel, but want to travel risk-free, and give them that assurance that when they travel, they would be free from any risk of infection. And therefore offer them products typically like ecotourism, adventure tourism, beach tourism, these kind of opportunities for people to travel. And if it could be given along with some kind of a subsidy supported by the central government, I think states can come together with very innovative strategies to generate this demand. And while we are at leisure tourism, we also must not forget the MICE segment, where we really need to now get back people to participate in events. We need buyer-seller meets, we need conferences to happen and not just online. Of course, we have now opened up so many cultural activities with certain standard protocols. I'm sure these kind of events can be organized with proper protocols in place, but it's very important to now kickstart that demand And while these government policies are aimed towards the supply side of it, I think demand side is one area where we need to look at. So I'll rest at that, and I'll thank you for giving me this opportunity. Rajdeep, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kapoor. I think you've sort of highlighted some of the challenges as well as the opportunities. And I think sometimes in our focus on challenges, we forget that there could be opportunities out there as well that need to be taken advantage of. And we'll come back to you on specifics about how the government of Tamil Nadu intends in some way to either subsidize or support specifically smaller travel operators and those the smaller business operators in the travel industry, because I've spoken to many of them and they seem to be very concerned about what lies ahead for them. So what protection, but we'll come back to that. Let me get a private sector perspective. Ajay Bakaya is joining us, Managing Director of Sarovar Hotels for over 25 years. And so let's get the other perspective. We've heard from government. Let's get the private sector. Mr. Bakaya, if you're with us, why don't you take the floor, sir?
Thank you, Rajdeep. Good morning, and good morning to all our other participants and viewers. Just to put this in perspective, we represent about 90 odd hotels across India, across the country. The hotels vary in size from 50 rooms to 225 rooms. They are in the 3-star, 4-star category. They're also in the 5-star and deluxe category. So it's a fairly broad spectrum and widely representative of the hotel industry in India. We are still in ICU and on ventilator, and we've been in that position for a long time. The trouble is that we are now forced to manufacture our own oxygen, so nobody's holding that to our face. And the industry, the hotel industry, the travel industry, hospitality overall has for once, very unified voice, knocked on doors again and again and again in the last 6 months and said, please help, please help, please help. We've been hit by a sledgehammer. So far, while we have understanding voices and very sort of soothsaying comments from the people in government, we've had no real help at all. And what are we saying? We're saying, hey guys, there were no lights in our hotels. They were dark. Don't charge us for connected load. We did not do anything. There was no activity. And if I switch on the lights, please charge me for what I consumed. We have very few answers. We're saying we didn't pour any alcohol. There were no guests and we weren't allowed to. Don't charge us fees for that period. There is no answer. We're saying don't charge us property taxes. There was no garbage clearance. There was nothing done on the streets. There is no answer. So it's an unfortunate situation. We have an industry where we've laid off hundreds and thousands of people. Hundreds of thousands of people are out on the road, and it's biting hard now. While they could manage, and I'm talking about people down the line who were on minimum wage and who were line staff. While they could perhaps manage a month or 2 or 3 or 4 on government doors and perhaps their own savings, they're now in a situation which is frantic. So quite honestly, we need a lot more. We need some serious help. And I think the time for discussing what it can be is long over. We continue to request, we continue to knock, we continue to shout, but we are yet to get any real action. And that's an unfortunate part from private industry point of view. In actual practice, we are, as far as trends go, we roughly finished about a 22% occupancy in July, 24 in August, 32, 33 in September, and we probably do slightly better in October. But a large number of hotels are still below cash break-even points. Forget any loan repayments. So it's a tough scenario. The trend is that, and I think Mr. Madhu will shed more light on the flights, but my info as of today is that roughly 40% of pre-COVID flight frequencies are up in the air, and those 40% enjoy a 65% to 70% load factor. So rates are very, very reasonable. So I think it's probably a lot more difficult for the airlines than it is for hotels. We're all in the same boat, and we're all struggling and hurting. Now, on the hotel side, wherever there are states that have opened up and to sort of COVID testing restrictions, to quarantine rules, etc. In the leisure places, we've seen a fair amount of traction. As Mr. Kapoor said, there are people that want to get out and get away. But as far as business hotels are concerned, they are doing single-digit occupancies by and large. Bombay is slowly picking up. Delhi would probably follow with large local populations. Cities like Bangalore, more than anything else, with a very strong dependence on IT and supported services and the culture that's come about in the last few months of work from home, and don't travel, will take the longest to come back. So Bangalore city is in single-digit occupancy. We'll probably see that trend till early or mid-January, and hopefully after that it gets better. We really need help from the government. Some states like Kerala, which are full of leisure and leisure hotels, small inns, small hotel keepers, to medium-sized to large size. Kerala hasn't opened up because they have a large number of problems. And we respect all the precautions taken to make sure that COVID doesn't spread. End of the day, we all need to survive through this all and come out alive, and then look at the business angle. But it is a drawback, and we need more help from the government in these places to say, what can we do to make these people survive? End of the day, tourism is roughly 10% of India's GDP. It's roughly 10% of India's workforce. And this includes a structured sector and a very large unstructured sector. In terms of opportunities, so these hotels were built as hotels. We've tried converting them for the short term into hospitals. We tried servicing COVID patients. We've tried servicing Vande Bharat flights. We've gone ahead and we've done all these very successfully. We've learned lots and lots on safety protocols. Every single hotel now, from the most expensive to the most economical, is saying, I will do delivery of food for you. Hotels are preferred today over standalone dining places for the simple reason that people perceive them as being more safe. So we have more people comparatively sitting in our restaurants and eating there. We are focusing a lot on weddings, even though the numbers are low, saying, here is a safe environment, come to us, please come to us. And where we have open spaces to offer, we become even more a preferred option. We are running around across the country after film crews. So whatever you watch on Amazon and Netflix, etc., needs to be shot somewhere. And we're saying, come to us and we provide you safe environments. So we're doing all those things. But at the end of the day, we got to get back to putting people in our rooms and in our hotels and filling up our restaurants. So that's where the situation is at the moment. It's not particularly bright. Despite being an eternal optimist, I see a fair amount of obstacles for a fair amount of time to come. I think we will need 6 months post stable vaccine before we can actually sort of say we are getting somewhere in terms of business. Thank you, Rajdeep.
Thanks very much, Mr. Bakaya, and thank you for that reality check, because I think it needs to be emphasized that that we are in the midst still of the pandemic, and the effects continue on sectors like tourism, like travel. And I think the point you made about job losses right down the line, how do you sort of restore a sense of confidence in industry is going to become a critical issue in the year ahead. It's not just about the short term, but it's also the medium and long term lingering effects that continue at the moment. And I think unless that reality check is accepted right down the line, we will continue to perhaps struggle to find solutions. So we'll come to the solutions in a moment, but let me take this to Madhu Mathen. He's the in-flight services ED of Air India. And I guess Air India, like other travel operators, has gone through a very difficult period in the last 6 months. And recovery doesn't seem immediate. But clearly with Vande Bharat having done a remarkable job, that is the big positive that we can take. But still Air India, like other operators, is going to go through difficult times. So I just want to understand from Mr. Mathen, why don't you give us a sense of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead, you believe, for aviation in the months ahead. Mr. Mathen?
Thank you, Rajdeep. We are all avid watchers of your news without the noise, and it's really a great privilege to have you moderating this discussion today. I would be speaking from an industry perspective rather than a single airline perspective. And The topic is about the challenges and opportunities thrown up by the COVID situation. So I feel, of course, it goes without saying that the biggest challenge is, of course, the unprecedented global aviation crisis. The airline sector is one of the hardest hit. Air travel worldwide, globally, is not expected to reach pre-COVID-19 levels globally until 2024, according to IATA estimates. Two-thirds of the world's airline fleet has been grounded, and worldwide, 18 airlines have filed for bankruptcy. Global passenger traffic is expected to decline by 60% from 4.5 billion in 2019 to 2 billion in 2020. But this challenge of this market situation also throws up some opportunity. As far as India is concerned, unlike a Singapore or a Hong Kong or a Dubai, India is a very strong domestic market. And Indian domestic air travel has been rebounding quite strongly from the 12 million passengers per month, which we used to carry pre-COVID, all the domestic airlines put together, to an estimated 5.5 million in October 2020. So we can say that we are almost at 50% of the pre-COVID level. There are also some opportunities which are thrown up along with this. See, because of the COVID fears, there is a clear preference for outdoor scenic travel and travel to less densely populated areas. And research reports of McKinsey and other leading consultancies also indicate that for the immediate future, there is demand for local holiday options within driving distance. So this could be a silver lining which marketeers can tap. Second challenge, of course, it's understood, is the fear, the lingering fear of the virus, which is still there. What this has done is that COVID-19 has added a new layer of pain points across the customer journey. Today, unfortunately, there are no standardized health and hygiene protocols. There is no universally accepted safety rating standard. What I feel is that the industry must come together to embrace the next set of interventions that solve all these COVID-19 induced pain points. For example, the already rapid advancements have been made in contactless services like contactless car rental, keyless room entry, and so on. I would also like to point out here a very good news, which is a IATA study which has just come out last week, which indicates that when you travel by air, the chances of contracting COVID are very, very minimal. In fact, the IATA report quantifies this by saying that out of 1.2 billion air travelers between January and July of this year, there have been only 44 cases of onboard transmission. Just 44 cases of onboard transmission out of 1.2 billion passengers who traveled. So studies like these must be publicized by the travel industry to show and prove that we can operate in a safe environment despite COVID. Another important challenge is the challenge of digital adoption. As we have all seen, most consumers and businesses have vaulted 5 years forward in a matter of just a few weeks of the COVID pandemic. So to succeed in this new environment, companies will need to ensure that their digital channels live up to the higher expectations. Abroad, lot of a lot of companies are making very rapid advancements. For example, many airlines are personalizing the websites. Many hotels are creating a tailored path and content experience on the website based on every information that is available to them about the customer. A lot of travel companies are curating content that inspires a particular customer, very, very personalized, customized options. So these are opportunities thrown up by the digital disruption which has happened. And I feel for companies which are in digital disruption, this is going to be a great opportunity, and we are going to see a lot of startups thriving in this area. The other challenge, and probably not so good news, is that we can all read the writing on the wall, which is that business travel will never be the same again. This is something we have to accept. Uh, World over, business travel drives over 50% of the profit for major airlines, but accounts for only 10% of the passengers. So all airlines have to uh, uh, look at compensating for the uh, uh, losses from business travel and make up from other areas. There are also some very interesting trends which would be interesting for hoteliers. I'm sure they would have already spotted these trends, because the line between business and leisure, business and leisure travel is blurring now. The pandemic and the rise of the remote work culture has the potential to accelerate the growth of what we call as digital nomads. This is more true abroad, but even in India, we find these people who can work from anywhere. They can work from any place, and they keep working from different places. For example, in Delhi, I had seen there were a lot of youngsters who had gone off to Kasauli for 2-3 weeks, and they were working from there during the pandemic. So this is one of the interesting trends we are going to see, and there are some numbers to it. There is a very popular website called Nomad List, and according to this website, there would be 1 billion so-called digital nomads worldwide by 2035. So this is one attractive market for the travel industry to tap. So I think with this, I have touched upon the challenges as well as the corresponding opportunities which we can tap. Thank you.
Thank you very much Mr. Mathen, because I think obviously tourism and aviation are intertwined, and you're going to need the numbers both in the air and on the ground. And we still, again, are a long way away from recovery. And again, will come back to you on the kind of support that the industry is actually looking for at a time like this, because I think we look for solutions also to all the challenges and opportunities that you pointed out. Our last panelist is Mr. B. Venugopal, currently member of the board of directors of State Bank of India and NCDX, and someone who can perhaps give us a perspective more as a sort of from an outsider rather than a day-to-day insider that our first three guests were. So why don't you go ahead, Mr. Venugopal, and give us your perspective as someone who's been in business and business administration and IT particularly for a very long time. You were a managing director of LIC, so you would know the challenges and the difficulties that exist in this ecosystem. Mr. Venugopal. Mr. Venugopal? Can you hear us, sir? Mr. Venugopal?
Rajdeep, I think Venu is having a power cut at his residence in Bombay. So he just messaged.
So what we'll do is that I think our three guests have raised various issues. Let's try and tackle them. And maybe Ajit, you can also keep sending us any questions that the audience has, so that we can get a conversation going at this point. I want to start with you, Mr. Kapoor. You were our first speaker. What are governments doing actually? You've spoken about the website and the registration through Nidhi that you're doing to ensure that everyone, in a sense, is knows, you're trying to create a community in a sense of all those who've been affected. But there are those who believe that tourism, you need a package, a stimulus package specifically for tourism and travel at a time like this. Is that something you're looking at, particularly for the small tour operators, the smaller hotels? Is there a package that you see that could be on the government sort of radar over the next few months, Mr. Kapoor?
Well, Rajdeep, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we have suggested to the central government to come out with a demand stimulus package, so to say. We'll see how the central government responds to that. But as far as state governments are concerned, I'll reiterate the financial difficulties that states are undergoing. So a direct kind of a grant or a subsidy to the hospitality industry players at the moment would be difficult. Of course, the demands that I think Mr. Bakaya mentioned, like he mentioned specifically about how hotels are expected to pay for electricity charges, fixed charges, and likewise pay for municipal charges, whereas they were practically closed. They did not draw power or they did not generate garbage. But what I want to mention to Mr. Bakaya and those in his industry is that yes, hotels were closed, businesses did not function, but that did not mean that municipalities and local bodies did not function. We may not have attended offices, but we were at home. We were generating garbage. So you had your garbage collector coming every day to collect garbage from the streets. Likewise, we all were working from home. We were staying at home. We were using power. How do you expect electricity boards to provide power if we don't pay for the fixed charges? After all, they have to in turn pay to the power generators, the fixed costs that are incurred by them. So it's an entire chain. You cannot just say that because I did not switch on the lights in my office or in my hotel, therefore I should not pay. If you don't pay, how will the power utility be able to then pay for the fixed costs that it has to incur? It also has to pay salaries to its own staff. A lot of work was done by state governments and is continuing to do in terms of providing services for pandemic control. They have mobilized manpower like never before. Who pays for them? Who pays for the various, the medical interventions? So all these require revenue, and therefore it would be unfair to expect that just because businesses did not function, and therefore they should be totally exempted from payment of these kind of statutory levies. However, I still would like to say that it's not a no. These demands are under examination at multiple levels and different state levels. There are limitations to what state governments can do. So therefore, all states have been requesting the central government to come to their assistance. As I mentioned, even GST dues are pending. There have been demands that the central government provide compensation, and ultimately the states are borrowing today to even pay for salaries for its staff. Therefore, it's a very difficult situation, even from government point of view, to provide any direct fiscal stimulus. Yet, I would again reiterate that there are ways by which we can stimulate demand. One is, of course, providing a direct fiscal stimulus, some kind of a subsidy for travel or some kind of a concession. At the same time, we need to come out with innovative strategies. I think Mr. Madhu Mathen very rightly pointed out, I think this is the new normal. We need to be more advanced in our digital outreach. We need to look at different opportunities in this whole thing. Just to give an example, traditionally, people used to go to travel agents' offices to chalk out their travel plans, or they would talk to somebody to work out. Today, you have a digital technology that allows you to, for example, take a medical professional's advice online through a video call. Why, for example, can the tourist or the tour operators not provide that service so that people can actually have a face-to-face chat with the tour operator and actually work out a schedule? He rightly mentioned, I think it was maybe Mr. Bakaya who mentioned, people are perhaps looking at a different kind of an experience. They want to go to the non-traditional tourist places. So why can't we have a kind of a platform where people can sit, on a video platform and actually talk to a tour operator who will help them design a package which would, look after their concerns with regard to the pandemic, and help them chalk out plans, help them with their bookings in a manner that would avoid any kind of personal contact. So these are ways by which we can now leverage digital technologies to reach out to that to the consumer and kickstart that demand. Rajdeep?
Very interesting. I think you're being honest when you say, look, there is only so much that government can do, particularly given the financial constraints that governments are going through. Lots of questions are coming in, but I'll just get Mr. Bakaya to give a response and then come to specific questions. Mr. Bakaya, you want to respond? You recognize what specifically do you believe the government can do for the industry that you believe they're not doing at the moment, given the financial constraints that governments are operating in at the moment, state and center?
Rajdeep, I understand that everyone is bleeding. So I'm not pointing any fingers here, and I'm not saying, you're wrong and I'm right. But I'm saying we need to go beyond the discussion stage and collectively find some answers. I think there is enough gray matter in this country between government and state and private players to find those answers. I think the collective will to find those answers so far has not been displayed greatly. I'm saying the biggest thing for hotels, speaking as a hotelier, is a 2-year moratorium on interest repayments and principal repayments. The interest builds up and is payable over time. The term or for which a loan is payable goes from, let's say, if it's a 10 years to a 12 years or 15 years to a 17 years. Hasn't really effectively happened yet. It's been under discussion for a while now. That's as far as the center is concerned. I'm not heading out with a begging bowl and saying, please give me everything for free. What can I do? It's our job to work and produce revenues, but I think we need a climate where we can produce better revenues and contribute more to the GSTs and everything else that we contribute to. So as far as the state governments are concerned, yes, we will ask for better charges on electricity. I never said give it to me free. We'll ask for waiver on alcohol license fees, and there is no logic to charging it.
One of those questions linked to what you're saying is the GM of Hotel Elite Grand in Chennai is raising, wants to know what happens to hospitality personnel. You've already spoken, Mr. Bakaya, of number of people getting laid off. Do you see them this being a process where all hotels will increasingly downsize? Do you see a future for these employees in the hotel industry? Is every hotel now going to just reorient its business model in this new normal for the foreseeable future?
So unfortunately, the bigger answer is that you'll see more job losses. A lot of the bigger players have held on so far, saying it's against our ethics to let people go in tough times. But end of the day, business is business. You can't hold on indefinitely. So some of the private players have done it differently. If I need, let's say, from 100 people, I only need 40. I'm saying to 3 different teams that you work for a month, and the next team comes in and the third team comes in. So at least you're all employed. You're gainfully employed. You're getting some money to take home and feed your families and take care of things. But yeah, numbers will go more and more and more. People will need to reorient themselves, re-educate themselves. You would have seen, all of you personally, that you have anywhere from a few dozen to a few hundred people saying, we can give you the bespoke pasta delivered at home. We can give you the finest of desserts at home. We'll deliver everything to you. We'll do anything from $100 to $1,000, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of people who are not there are now offering their services online to the public at large and try to make ends meet. There will obviously be an evolution and a churn, but we are still in no position
No,
to.
so will that churn, sorry to intervene, will that churn mean that hotels will necessarily now work even in the future with smaller, tighter, leaner teams?
Absolutely. As long as business recovery doesn't happen, that is bound to happen. Very much.
That's Vikram Kapoor. Supriya Malhotra has a question, which is, I think she is raising the fact that is government aware of the potential of travel and tourism, that the contribution to the GDP. Whenever you hear the speeches made by our ministers, especially at the center, you don't hear them speak about travel and tourism with the kind of focus that perhaps the sector needs. Do you think? I know it's unfair to ask this to a bureaucrat. You're not a politician, but do you believe that the politicians recognize the potential of the travel and tourism sector?
Absolutely. I don't know where this is coming from. I mean, the tourism industry is, a very important segment of our economy. I mean, it was mentioned by one of the earlier speakers that nearly 10% of the economy is on account of hospitality, travel, and the tourism industry. So we do recognize that it's a major contributor to the economy. It's a major generator of jobs. And whether it's the central government or individual state governments, tourism is an important, area of focus. However, traditionally, if you look at tourism, most of the business that is generated is by the private sector. The government is not a direct provider of services, except for a few properties or a few services that government provides. Government does not directly generate, the income, in this sector. It is mostly private sector driven. At the same time, the government is also not in the business of regulation, unlike other sectors where there is a very strong regulation. Tourism is by and large a very unregulated sector, and maybe for its good, because you've seen the pitfalls of over-regulation, and therefore I think we are somewhere missing, the wood for the trees by not unnecessarily regulating the sector or trying to provide services in competition to the private sector. It does not be mistaken as government's non-interest in the subject. Government is definitely interested, but perhaps it doesn't want to, unnecessarily regulate it or get involved in the provision of services.
Okay, but there will be those who will make the. I take your point of not being an over-regulated sector, but the need to sort of incentivize. I think, how do you incentivize travel and tourism? That's the question. A quick answer to that, Mr. Kapoor.
See, let's not look at everything in terms of fiscal incentives, Rajdeep. There are other ways by which you can incentivize. There are non-fiscal measures. For instance, just to give an example, there is the segment of, let's say, increasing segment of bed and breakfast or the homestay segment. Now, unfortunately, they are finding some problems in getting themselves registered or getting them the licenses at the local body level or at the state level. I think if government can facilitate this process of making it a seamless experience, making it hassle-free, that is one way by which you can incentivize setting up more and more of these kind of homestays or bed and breakfast, which will allow people to travel and add to the number of rooms that are available. So there are multiple ways by which you can make the tourism sector more competitive. There are a lot of regulations and all. For example, building regulations are there, postal regulatory zone regulations are there, which sometimes impede the development of new areas which we are talking about. I think if government can at least help to ease those kind of hassles, that itself would be a great contribution to the sector.
Interesting. That you need a much more, of course, you need fewer regulations, need to provide in some way facilities that make it easier to do business. I have a question from ARF. He's from Parveen Travels, Chennai, and he wants to know from Mr. Madhu Mathen. You shared details of a study about how the number of cases in the air travel segment of traveling by air there is a minimal impact on coronavirus. In that case, why is the government asking to maintain only 50% occupancy on airlines when it comes to road transport, the disparity, I'm clueless. So, I mean, should airlines now, should we now be back to full occupancy? I interviewed Hardeep Puri, the civil aviation minister, and he believes that by the end of the year, we'll be back to where we were pre-COVID. Are you as confident, Mr. Mathen? And do you believe that the time has come to lift all the restrictions on the number of flights?
Yes, Rajdeep, I watched that excellent interview you had with the Honorable Civil Aviation Minister, where he explained everything so beautifully, and you had also asked him a lot of searching questions. So coming back to the question of Mr. Arif, see, inside an aircraft, there is no restriction on the number of seats that can be offered. But what the government has done is that the total capacity that can be deployed by an airline has been regulated. Initially, every airline was allowed to deploy 25% of the pre-COVID capacity. Gradually, it was increased to 40%, and now it's around 60%. So this is an excellent policy from the government to gradually increase the capacity and bring it back to the pre-COVID level. But as far as an aircraft is concerned, if the capacity is 180 seats, the airline can fill all the 180 seats, and there is no restriction whatsoever on that. And also, I talked about the very minimal onboard transmission. The reason is that now, you see, this COVID, our learning is every day. Every day we are learning new things, and medical research is also turning up new facts. So
Right.
there are a couple of reasons why the onboard transmission is less. It is now being found out by the latest study, medical research which has been published by IATA, that the seat itself uh, acts as a defense, in transmission, because all passengers are facing forward and not facing each other, and there is a seat in between. Secondly, the in a modern jet aircraft, the air is exchanged every 3 minutes. So the fresh air comes, and the air within the cabin is exchanged. And also, the third reason is that the filters, the air filters, HEPA filters we call it, these are hospital grade filters that are used in the aircraft. Because of all these reasons, the chance of onboard transmission is really, really minimal. And in that sense, air travel is absolutely safe if you, of course, follow the precautions like wearing your mask. Thank you.
Mr. Mathan, why don't you take another question that Shafi Ahmed asked? He says, when do you think international flights will be allowed? Because business hotels especially are largely dependent on this.
Of course, I wouldn't have the answer to that, because as of now, till the end of this month, we still do not have regular scheduled international flights. So I wouldn't like to hazard a guess, but I'm sure the government will soon come out with an announcement, and we have to wait for that. So
In fact, in the interview I did with Mr. Puri, he seemed to suggest that this won't happen till early next year, February at the very earliest. So we're still 4 to 5 months away, I think, from reviving international travel. And that's a big setback again to business travel. An interesting question from Mr. Balaji, he's an ex-GM of Sangam Hotels. Mr. Bakaya, you could take this, because what he's saying is, as you've said, there have been a lot of layoffs, but a number of employees have taken personal loans. What happens to them? Is there the human factor? I know we keep emphasizing this about there is a need to show greater empathy. I can understand that you have a business, so you can't, beyond the point, you can't retain all your employees if the business model is struggling. But is there any attempt being made to provide should there be an attempt made to provide support to, let's say, people who work 10, 15, 20 years with a hotel, now suddenly find themselves possibly out of a job?
Yeah, Rajesh, the answer is very definitely yes. There should be an effort made. Is there a structured plan in place for the industry or by the industry voluntarily? No, I think it depends largely on the grace of the owners. And these are times when the best and the worst of character comes out. So I'm aware that a lot of organizations are sympathetic to these scenarios and are helping out in whatever form they can. But there is no structured edict in place that says this is what you must do. And I think it would eventually, in private business, depend upon the promoters of the business as to what route they take and what attitudes they take towards such situations. But by and large, a large number of people have been have been sympathetic and have said, let's look at this from a human perspective, not purely from a business perspective. That's why I say a lot of people are rotating people in the same position and saying, you work 15 days and the next guy works another 15 days, so both of you at least have half month's salary, etc.,
Right.
etc.
Interesting question by Rajdeep Bhattacharya. Mr. Bakai, you could take that. Regarding the new LTC circular, what tourism and hospitality industry think about it? How are they taking it to government? I think tourism and hospitality should raise their voice now. As with the latest circular, government asking their 2.2 crore employees not to travel this year, spend their LTC allowance in purchasing goods. Should the industry be raising its voice is what Rajdeep Bhattacharya wants to raise.
Yeah, so the answer to Mr. Bhattacharya is yes, for sure. We believe we've been shortchanged. The policy is only for government employees. It doesn't go beyond that. B, the policy doesn't really well, it's called a leave travel allowance. It doesn't really encourage leave travel in any manner. It's putting some money in the hands of people to spend, but they can spend it any which way they want to. Are we raising our voice? Yes, we are, and we are sort of saying, we need help, and stretch the scheme to cover more people, not just government employees, and let them then spend that money on actual travel, whether it is buses, coaches, guides, tour operators, airlines, hotels, the whole works. Yeah, we think it's always easy to pass judgment. But we think it can be expanded to be more positive, more far-reaching.
Okay. A very interesting question from B. Narayanan from the Hindu Business Line, and maybe Mr. Kapoor, you can take it. Tamil Nadu is known for its medical tourism. How has COVID affected this segment? Is there any fresh opportunity provided by COVID to increase medical tourism in the state? Mr. Kapoor, why don't you take that?
Rajdeep, medical tourism is a very generic kind of a term. I don't think I'm in a position to reply to that. I mean, only people who are in the medical sector can perhaps reply. But whatever informal feedback we have received from hospitals and medical service providers is that they are definitely hit very badly because elective surgeries are not happening. People who used to traditionally come to places like Chennai or Coimbatore, for specialized treatment from states like in the Northeast or from Bengal are not planning, they're not traveling. One, of course, because of the limitation in travel options. The other is the genuine fear of getting infected. So yes, the hospitals are suffering from lack of business on that side. I'm not an expert in medical tourism, frankly, and I don't think that we have looked at trying to promote it, in a particular fashion. It's largely been driven by the medical sector. So I think somebody who's in that sector alone can answer this question better. Thank you.
Okay. Sriharan Balan has a question. He's Director, Madura Travel Services. Mr. Kapoor, you can take this again. As the slogan from the central government is "Go vocal for local," I guess the government of Tamil Nadu is yet to go vocal in welcoming tourists. We as private agencies have been putting up posters and offers welcoming domestic tourists. I would request the government to come up with articles, news, ads on national media to give more confidence for domestic travelers to travel to Tamil Nadu. States like Rajasthan, Kerala are already doing it well with the bookings for the month of November and December. Starting today, we can also do a comeback. This would be a great incentive. Just creating, as I think we said this at the start, Mr. Kapoor, restoring confidence in those who are the stakeholders in the tourism sector. An aggressive campaign is what is being suggested.
Rajdeep, I just want to mention in this regard that still now the state has not yet opened the places of tourist interest. It's just for your knowledge and for the benefit of all the others. As per the latest unlockdown guidelines, while hotels, restaurants are open, but the places of tourist interest like monuments or museums or other places where people go, they are still not open. So unless these are open, there is no point in doing a marketing strategy, or going for bookings. Now, this is beyond our control in the tourism department. It's a call that is taken typically by the experts in the health sector, by the revenue department, who actually issue the orders. And I'm sure that they are trying to balance the public interest, public health interest with the interest of the tourism sector. But at the moment, the situation in Tamil Nadu is that places of tourist interest are not yet open. Let's see when it opens up and government takes a policy decision to open it up, then maybe we
When
can
do you
go.
see that happening? When do you see that happening, Mr. Kapoor, at the earliest? When do you believe that the state will be in a position to open up, traditional places of interest, let's say Mamalapuram or, hill stations, beach resorts? When do you see the state being in a position to open them?
No, as I said, decisions are taken in consultation with health experts. We have a task force that advises the Honorable Chief Minister, and I think they are continuously monitoring the pandemic situation. The numbers, what we see right now, seem encouraging because the number of cases is coming down, and if this trend continues, we are all hoping that there will be more opening up of sectors like tourism. So let's wait for a decision by the government in this regard. Once it opens up, I can assure you that we will leave no stone unturned in going vocal, and we would look forward to working together with tour operators, hoteliers to give us those vital inputs. We can, from the TTDC side, help design marketing strategies and the various kind of advertising along with them. So, but we just want to wait for the opening up. Yeah.
Let's be honest. The picture, let's cut the chase, remains relatively grim, which is why Mehul has a question. One thing is for sure, that until the vaccine comes, nothing moves. Instead of pressing for an unlock 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this time should be utilized in pressurizing the government to extend interest-free moratorium by at least 2 years for our industry to bounce back. That is the only way forward. Mr. Kapoor, you want to take that too? Again, it's coming down to people believe they need some kind of an incentive which goes, which actually makes a difference to their entire business model. Are you telling me governments have no money today to even consider a moratorium, let's say on interest-free loans?
Rajdeep, I mean, this is typically a question which is addressed to the central government because the financial sector comes in their domain. As you might have been covering this subject already, I think discussions at the government level and the way the MSME package has been announced, I'm sure the tourism sector can avail of the benefits of that sector. There has been talk of the banks being requested to renegotiate the existing loans, giving a longer repayment period, rescheduling the loans, and so on and so forth. I was talking about giving direct fiscal support in terms of subsidies. That is difficult for the state government, but it is always open to the banking sector to renegotiate these loans and offer a longer moratorium. I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to answer that question because that needs to be addressed to the central government.
No, but Mr. Bakaya, would you want, do you believe that there needs to be a specific tourism, a package for tourism? Has the time come for the central government to say, look, we recognize that this is the largest employer, contribute after agriculture, contributes 10% to our economy, to our GDP. This is where we need to have a we need to provide a package for tourism, Mr. Bakaya. Do you believe that the center should come up, particularly as we enter peak tourism season, or what would have been normal times been peak tourism season, provide a package as an incentive?
Absolutely. I think it's perhaps already a little too late, but it's time for the government to come out with something, and it has to come from the center more than from the states, saying 1, 2, 3 is what we're going to do to help these guys get back on their feet. And the interest moratorium or the loan repayment moratorium is probably the biggest thing that can help businesses, small and large. But yeah, very definitely.
Okay,
Given the fact that 11, 12 million foreigners who used to come into the country are not going to be able to travel at all, or at least 90-95% of them are not going to be coming in over the next few months. We need something that pushes more people to travel and for the industry to survive.
Okay, very quick answer to this, Mr. Kapoor, from Samuel Rajan. He says, sir, I would like to know when the government will allow hotels and resorts to operate swimming pools. I represent a resort in Mahabalipuram, Chennai. In one of the WHO statements, it says virus doesn't travel through water. especially the water in the pool, if it's chlorinated, allowing pool access can vastly improve the occupancy, especially for domestic tourists to visit. You want to give a quick answer to that, Mr. Kapoor?
Rajdeep, I'm not a medical expert, but I again reiterate that the government is being advised very closely by a panel of top medical experts. And if they have advised that swimming pools need not be opened at the moment, I think we should go by that advice.
Okay, fair enough. There's another question that I have, and this maybe can be taken by you, Mr. Mathen. Which segment will come back stronger, business or leisure? Is a question being asked, Mr. Mathen. What's your sense? What do you think will, do you believe that business travel will take much longer to recover than leisure travel, especially domestic travel?
There is absolutely no doubt on that. Even the earlier crisis which we faced, global financial crisis and other previous downturns in the market, it was the leisure travel which rebounded first, and business travel was the last to recover. And even though it's somewhat of a bad news for the participants here, I mean, you all know it's still worth saying that MICE travel will take even a slightly longer time than business travel to recover. As far as international versus domestic is concerned, the IATA study shows that in China, which is actually ahead of the curve in terms of COVID, the domestic market is showing a very strong resurgence. The same signs are seen in India also. So it will be the domestic market which recovers first, and then a little later only can we expect the international market to recover.
You agree, Mr. Mathen, with what the minister told me the other day, that domestic travel could reach pre-COVID levels by the end of December?
I wouldn't like to hazard a guess, or rather either compliment or contradict the Honorable Minister, but the signs, I'm speaking as of today. Now, as I was, just as we are speaking, I saw a tweet from the Honorable Minister that we've carried about 176,000 passengers yesterday. So if you do your math, that would total to something like 5.5 million passengers in the month of October, end of October. So that would bring us to almost 50% of the pre-COVID level. So I would definitely say it's a strong resurgence of the domestic market.
Interesting. Mr. V. Narayanan of the Times of India in Chennai has a question for you, Mr. Kapoor. Specifically wants to know does the Tamil Nadu government have a clear strategy? You know, you have elections coming up in 6 months, and you know, elections often take over everything else. Is there a concern that he and others should have, that at election time politics will take over, and therefore reviving a sector then gets the goes into the backseat? Is there a clear strategy for the next 6 months?
Rajdeep, before I take this question, I just want to supplement what Mr. Mathen was saying a moment ago about domestic tourism. I heard from the Honorable Union Minister yesterday during our conference that apparently there are an estimated over 1.2 crore Indians who travel abroad every year. And I believe that is one huge segment which perhaps can be now tapped for the domestic market, because they are not likely to travel abroad. So you could see, more of these people migrating from the international travel to domestic travel. It's an opportunity for the domestic tourism industry. Now, coming back to the question that you asked, in terms of a clear strategy, I again want to reiterate that, of course, there is an overall policy, but then a strategy needs to be worked out, given that after you unlock down, post-COVID, what would be our strategy to get back the industry on rails. So we are working along with the various industry stakeholders to formulate such a strategy, but there is a huge X factor, which is we still don't know when this particular, the industry will be fully opened up. Once the places of tourist interest are opened up, definitely you can set in motion any strategy. But there are now concerns from health professionals, health experts, that there could be a second wave of, infections, as we are seeing in so many countries. God forbid if it happens, all your plans will go waste. And therefore, we need to be, wary of this challenge, this danger of a surge, a second wave, as they say. If it happens, then you need to recalibrate your whole approach. So I think it's better for us to just watch, see how this this pandemic plays out before jumping into some kind of a strategy.
Karan Bakshi, GM Chariot Beach Resort, Mahabalipuram asks you, Mr. Kapoor, why can't government give GST freedom for hotels till March 2021? We might not get funding, so in a way, give this relaxation so guests get the benefit directly, are encouraged to stay in hotels.
Rajdeep, I couldn't see this question. I'm not aware of the issue. I would appreciate if the individual could separately, discuss with us this issue about the GST. As I said, I'm not aware of this issue, and I need to discuss with the commercial tax department on this issue.
Let me ask Mr. Bakaya. Mr. Bakaya, is there any specific, it's one thing to talk in generalities, a specific demand that you and other hotel hoteliers would have from the government? If I were to ask you 1, 2, 3, the top 2, 3 things that you'd like to see, Mr. Bakaya?
Rajdeep, can I just interrupt you a minute?
Yes.
To welcome Mr. M. Damodran, who is the former chairman of SEBI. He has just joined us. And I would leave the introduction to you. Of course, just to add that he is part of our industry as well, because he is a non-executive chairman of Indigo Airlines. And I'll just take a minute of your time just to introduce SIMA to you. SIMA is an association of elite hoteliers and professionals from tourism and hospitality space in southern India, with hoteliers, travel agents, transport operators, professional conference organizers, and event managers forming the major stakeholders in this association. SIMA intends to work closely with various state governments and associations to help transform the South Indian MICE industry and ensure greater far-reaching economic impact for all partners in the MICE ecosystem, and we invite all stakeholders to join in SIMA. So we have to specially thank Mr. Vikram Kapoor, IAS, Secretary Tourism, for having sponsored this seminar as a gold sponsor. Thank you, sir, once again. Rajdeep, over back to you with a small introduction for Mr. Damodaran from your side. Please.
Yes, maybe we can therefore push ahead now that Mr. Damodaran has joined us. Thank you very much, Mr. Damodaran. He's an old friend and someone who one greatly respects. He's a corporate advisor, mentor, of course, a distinguished former senior government official, had a very important role in SEBI and in regulating the stock markets. He's a director on the boards of Larsen & Toubro, Hero MotoCorp, Tech Mahindra, Crisil, Biocon, Experian India. He's also non-executive director and chairman of Indigo, something that I didn't know, but I think his focus on corporate governance and has given him a very, has enabled him to carve a niche in the world of business and administration and management, and people look up to him for guidance. So at a time of where there is this uncertainty and fear over what lies ahead, particularly in the tourism and travel sector. Mr. Damodaran, why don't you give us a sense of what lies ahead and what you would like to see? I think what people are looking for is someone who can act as a Sherpa today, guiding them towards the future. So why don't you play that role, Mr. Damodaran, today at this SIMA event? Why don't you go ahead, sir?
Thank you, Rajdeep, for those very kind words. Yes, we go back a long way. When I was a little younger than I am at this point of time, and you were a little younger too. You're much younger than me. Great to see you here. And one of the reasons that I took time out from another commitment that I have is that Ajit told me you were going to be here. And I said that since you will not invite me to your television programs, I might as well get to say hello to you on this format. So I'm not politically correct enough to be on any television channel debates, but let's get that out of the way. You asked me to indicate what I think is likely to happen, what we need to do, etc. I was with a bunch of students yesterday in the evening, and many of them wanted to know what the future was going to look like. I told them, you are the future, I am the past. Hopefully, I am also part of the present, but you are the future and you should have clarity on where you are headed, where the country is headed, where different sectors of the economy are headed. But that said, it would take a very brave person to predict what the future will look like. If you are an incorrigible optimist like I am, you will think that while COVID might never ever go away, its impact on our lives and our work will be much less than it is at this point of time. While we might not get back to the old normal, the new normal a few months later will not be as frightening as it looks at this point of time. This is what my optimism tells me. Should I wear the lens of the realist and look at it? Maybe I'll push it down by another 2 months or so. But I don't think we need to live with the feeling that this will never ever go away. It will continue to impact us as seriously as it is at this point of time, and that our life and work would be adversely impacted. I think in the last few months, a lot of lessons have been learned. Work from home certainly is one of the lessons that has been learned. It looked like a curse at a point of time that you couldn't leave your home, go to work, meet your colleagues, have the comfort of the working environment that you were used to for months and years. And then I think a lot of people adjusted to it. There were lots of problems. There was inconvenience for other family members. There was a negative impact on mental health. All of that happened. But with all of that, I think we discovered that it was possible to work and work reasonably effectively from our homes. That has been one of the learning across sectors. It's not just the IT industry that did that, or some of the manufacturing industries. I think the service industry certainly, to the extent possible, decided to work from home and to deliver what it was expected to deliver to its stakeholders. Secondly, I think we often talk about resilience, especially the city that you come from, Rajdeep. We always hear there's a lot of resilience, every crisis it will stand up to, etc. But I think India has demonstrated time and time again that no matter what the problem is, we might get knocked off our feet, but we'll dust our pants, we'll stand up and we'll continue the good fight. And I think with some of the sectors getting back to near pre-COVID levels, they're not quite at pre-COVID levels, there is reason for optimism. 2 months ago, when I first heard that green shoots were being seen, and this we heard, I think, first either from the finance minister or from the chief economic advisor, I thought they had gone to the optician and got colored glasses, because I didn't see any green shoots in the economy at that point of time. Now there is reason to believe that for various reasons, some induced by COVID, in fact, there are things are looking up. Take the two-wheeler industry. I sit on the board of the world's largest two-wheeler manufacturer. And we are seeing numbers which indicate that a lot of persons who were earlier using public transport are opting for the safety of personal transport. And therefore, two-wheelers are being looked at as a preferred mode of transport. The worst hit, of course, have been the hotel industry and the airlines, because there was a feeling that if you stayed in a hotel, or you took a flight, you were almost certain to expose yourself to danger. Even though scientific studies have established that airlines are safer than most other places in the world, because the way in which air is treated, the fact that it comes down vertically, scientific studies have shown that it's very safe. Hotels, on their part, have introduced safety protocols that are as good as any that could be in place. and therefore the hotels are no longer unsafe to go to. And yet we have to get over this mental barrier of getting out there. Staycations are being promoted, and I think a staycation is a great thing. It is an opportunity to be creative, spend time with yourself and yet be creative. But it'll take a while for it to catch up. I think the opportunities have been cited. As Churchill famously said, never waste a good crisis. So I don't think India as a country will waste this crisis, because residing in every crisis, there is an opportunity that we will certainly exploit. And I think we are reasonably good at it. At an individual level, what persons are seeing is that you did not need 10% of the things that you had in order to live a reasonably comfortable life. That many things were really surplus. What you had in the pre-COVID situation and what you're not using now, what you don't need to use now for whatever reason. Life will get a little simpler. The basic lesson in economics that the fit will survive, the less than fit will have to find a way out of their business, will certainly kick in. There will be consolidations, there will be mergers, there would be failures, both big and small, because people don't have a plan B. People have not looked at a what if kind of a situation. They thought the good times would last forever and a day. They will pay a price in some sense. Either they will contract in their operations, or they will perhaps look at new business opportunities, abandoning those where they have not turned up trumps. The stronger ones, the fitter ones will survive. Newer business opportunities will arise. One of the things that I was told by a young person yesterday when we were talking in terms of entrepreneurship was that because a lot of people have lost their jobs, the hidden desire to be an entrepreneur will find expression because you don't have a job. Now you need to find something to do. It will not be, as Milton famously said, and that one talent which is death to hide, lodged with me useless. Because this crisis will ensure that that talent, that ability, that desire surfaces and finds expression in the new post-COVID world or in the COVID world. I think confidence levels have to increase. I think you need to see a more of trust, more of transparency. You should not hide anything from people. Tell them what they need to know. You should see more teamwork. You will certainly see more talent that is surfacing. And you'll see more technology applications. And I think these 5 T's are what is going to inform our life and work in future.
If I may ask you though, to just tell us what role do you see governments play? Because you've been in both government and you've had a close look at private sector. A number of people who've been asking me questions today during our conversation, as well as our panelists, have tried to respond to people from the tourism and travel sector who feel the time has come for a helping hand. Now that helping hand, some of the suggestions I've got from someone called Satish, we need a GST break for 6 months, we need a subsidy, we need something to get a sense. A package is being spoken about. That tourism and travel, particularly badly affected and likely to be affected for the next 12 months in some form or the other, needs to see that the government needs the government to provide a helping hand. Not regulation, but in terms of actual financial benefit. Do you see the government, should the government do that? Do you believe that government must focus sector by sector and look at if you can use this opportunity of a crisis to bring in farm reform? How about using the crisis to give tourism and travel a helping hand? Is what has been a underlying theme, I think, right through this morning's conversation. Do you see that as something government should look at very seriously?
Let me address the easier part of your question, which is what role, if any, does regulation have? I think regulators should back off. We should have regulation that is pragmatic, that is contextually relevant, and not be an overkill. This is as good an opportunity as any other to revisit the content of regulation, revisit the scope of regulation, revisit the problems that regulation creates. In fact, when we look at risk management. We used to earlier look at regulation as one of the risks. Now we even look at regulators as risks in our present risk metrics. Because if you don't anticipate what they do, you will have problems. As for the travel and tourism industry, and in a lighter vein, let me tell you that alphabetically they come at the end of the queue. There's not much left after that, alphabetically. So if you start with agriculture, it'll take a while to get to travel and tourism. But I'm hoping they will not go the alphabetical way. What will government do? What has government done? Let's start with what government has done. It hasn't done enough. The big package that was announced, if you actually strip it down to its essentials, contains some of what is already in the budget, but has been included in the package. It contains some element of kicking the can down the road. You reduce your percentage of provident fund deductions from 12% to 10%. It's sorting out nobody's problem. I suspect even GST postponements are going to be something of that nature. It will catch up later, and you would not be expecting it to hit you harder than it is hitting you at this point of time. There must be a sector by sector approach. You cannot have a situation in which one size fits all or one set of solutions fits all is going to work. It simply doesn't work that way. You can't say that we are helping people by looking in the direction of the banks. Firstly, banks need help. And much of your stimulus package is the money that you expect banks to provide. And when banks are not in a mood to lend, when there is safety in indecision, when your investigative agencies are equating bona fide errors of judgment with ab initio mala fide decisions, which banker in his senses will lend? And therefore, that money that you expect the banking system to cough up is not going to come unless you create a climate of confidence, which will then translate to courage on the part of the bankers to lend. That is not going to happen. Looking in the direction of the Reserve Bank is not good enough. I think monetary policy has done enough. The governor a few months ago said his approach will be whatever it takes. But there's only so much that monetary policy can do, even if you have a governor who says whatever it takes, we will do, and whose latest policy in any case gives primacy to growth and puts inflation on the back burner, which I think is contextually a very good policy. But the answer must come from the fiscal policy which belongs to the government. And that's not coming honestly. Between lives and livelihood, have we fallen between two stools, not doing enough for lives, not doing enough for livelihood? Opening up, but opening up in a manner that does not help the economy enough and at the same time increases the threats to lives. Is that the way to go forward? I'm not so sure. The next is this business of, I want to do something as a government, but I'm worried what the credit rating agencies will say, what the international rating agencies will do. Is that the constituency for which you were elected? The rating agencies live in the same universe. They recognize the reality of COVID and its impact. They recognize that governments have a primary role to play in ensuring that the economy is put back on track. And if in a very textbook kind of way they lower your ratings, so be it. Which country is going to get great ratings going forward? Because many countries have loosened the purse strings. We are not loosening it enough. I think we need to show courage. We need to recognize that there are sectors that need support. Take airlines. Many, many developed economies have given large packages to the airline industry. The Indian airline industry hasn't got 1 rupee. What we've had are restrictions. And then in a very curious way, what COVID has demonstrated is that India is a federal state. The center might take decisions saying you can now open up flights, and state governments will say, sorry, we are not opening up our airports. Article 1 says that India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. Those last 2 words of states are finally finding expression. Could be because you denied them the legitimate GST dues that they are now pushing back wherever they can, say sorry. Health is our business as much as it is yours, and therefore we will not open up our airports. 14-day quarantine, no matter where you come from. Things of that nature will discourage travel, will discourage tourism, will discourage everything else. Just look around, see what other countries are doing. Take some lessons from there. You cannot afford to be too late. And I think we need to spend far more money in a targeted, constructive fashion, looking at sectors that are employment providers. Today, you need to provide employment. But if you don't support a sector like tourism, for example, which is a major employment generator, you're hurting employment. Forget the fact you're hurting tourism revenues and all of that. I think short answer to your question, government needs to do much, much more and needs to do it as of yesterday.
Very interesting, because we've got a few comments and we've just got about 10 minutes left. So let's try and get some of those comments. These are people actively in the industry, Mr. Damodaran, and I'll widen it also to my other guests who are here. But why don't you take one question which is being raised at the moment? And it's an interesting question because I think it raises some of the concerns that a number of people have, which is that should the government be giving tax breaks? In your view, is that the way you should go? Is this, as you said, different countries have adopted different methods. There is payroll support for the large number of people who are who've struggled with either declining salaries. Some have lost jobs. Some countries have done that. Other countries are giving tax breaks. At the moment in India, we don't see that aggressive desire to sort of promote, to sort of support industry. Do you believe that, as some of our the people watching are suggesting, that give us tax breaks, give us those incentives? Is that where you would start?
I don't think tax breaks is the answer, much as I hate to say it. I would love to pay less tax than I'm doing at this point of time. So I'm sure would several others, including corporates and businesses. But the fact is that it might be seen as regressive. It might be seen as disproportionately benefiting the rich at the expense of the poor, because the minute you extend even to those within a certain income group or companies at a certain level, you will immediately start getting claims from others saying, what wrong did we do that we're being denied tax breaks? I think the answer is create demand, put more money in the hands of the public, and do it in a manner in which it doesn't get either wasted or hoarded. Because what is happening is, when you have a major crisis that hits you, even if you put money in the hands of people, the tendency is to play safe, not to spend it, which is why you gave them the money in the first place, but to hoard it, not invest it, but just keep it because you think tomorrow might be worse than today is. Generate a climate of optimism, of informed optimism based on facts, not speculative comments or wish lists. That's not going to get you anywhere.
How do you give how do you give the tourism and travel industry a tax break? Would you give them subsidy or a tax break, or do you believe that the tourism and travel industry simply has to find its own imaginative ways of surviving?
To all of this, I have one simple question, is that if the tourism industry puts itself in the shoes of the government and looks at it from there, then you see what is possible, what is not possible. Today, what happens in governments is there are a whole lot of people that go there with wish lists, and clearly the government doesn't have enough. And then you end up doing a little bit for
back of the envelope, it will cost you about 2,000 crore, which, given the size of the fiscal package that was announced, is just peanuts. But 2,000 crore investment, a direct investment, by putting money in the hands of the consumer and getting him or her to actually spend on tourism-related services, would actually mean 4,000 crore being spent in the industry. And given the multiplier effect that it has, possibly you are generating, something like about 10,000 crore of economic activity. And if you were to look at the GST and the tax collection, you would practically be able to recover this investment, by way of GST collections, about 18% back of the envelope, about 1,800 crores. So what I'm saying is, we need to now, as he's rightly pointed out, go for interventions now. There's no point in doing it 6 months from now. As Mr. Bakaya mentioned, you are in ICU. An ICU patient requires help now, not after 6 months after he's dead and gone. So we need to quickly come out with these kind of interventions. India perhaps cannot do what the Western economies are doing, which is give payroll support and all, because it's too costly. We can't afford it. But these kind of targeted interventions are something which really can work wonders for the industry. Now, coming back to your question, Rajdeep, Tamil Nadu is one of the states which has been the worst affected, one of the worst affected states in terms of the pandemic, and therefore our response has been very graded. We have been constantly been guided by a task force, led by some top health experts, and we have therefore been unlocking the economy in a more conservative manner than perhaps some other states. Now, obviously, that is delaying the economic, revival. There has to be a balance, but trust the government. I think it is doing an excellent job in trying to balance the life and the livelihood issue. I think in the next round of unlockdown, perhaps, we may be fortunate to open up the areas of tourist interest, and which in itself would be a big boost to the sector. Thank you, Rajdeep.
Because a number of people, why don't you open up pilgrimage sector? We need pilgrimage tourism. It's an important element, I know, in your state. So clearly there are people who believe that the time to open up has come. Mr. Bakaya, you believe that the time to open up has come? It's now. You can't wait now till March, till the vaccine comes. We don't even know when the vaccine's distribution will take place. You believe this October to March period is the critical period where you would request government to open up now?
I think I'd look at several sectors in several areas, but tourism would not be pilgrim tourism would not be top of my list. I don't think as a responsible hotel and tourism professional, we recommend that we open up places which are going to mean large crowds and large numbers. So for example, Tirupati is open today. You can go there if you wish to. But they're severely restricting numbers. And I would say we need a more responsible approach as far as pilgrim tourism specifically is concerned. Because it means very, very large volumes, and large volumes could mean a large upsurge in cases. In fact, I want to expand on a point that Mr. Kapoor made earlier. I am of the very strong belief that all of our cities and every city and every country is going to see a zigzag curve as far as COVID goes. We're not going to see a straight line recovery. We will have things opening up, more cases, things tightening up, and less cases, etc., till we have a vaccine in place. So I'd be a little watchful and a little wary on pilgrim destinations because they attract very, very large numbers. And I'm saying, yes, open up, but be conscious of what numbers you can handle and be careful with those numbers.
The final word from you, Mr. Damodaran, any words of advice to all the professionals of the travel and tourism sector who are watching this event? What would you tell them? They all seem, from their questions, low on confidence. What do you do to restore a sense of confidence in them?
In a university in the US, talking to one of the deans there, he said he'd been to India and took part in adventure tourism. And I asked him, where did you go? He said, no, I went from Delhi to Meerut by road, and that road journey was an adventure. So, I mean, we moved on from that kind of adventure to genuine adventure tourism. This was a good 25 years ago. I think we need to help the industries that provide job opportunities. And what the industry needs to do is to close ranks, have identity of purpose, go to the government and say, let us promote a message, whether it's the travel industry, the tourism industry, that the world outside is not as dangerous as you think, provided you take the hotels will obviously do what is right to make place safe. The airlines are already doing that. The airports are already doing that. Far more than many of the counterparts are doing elsewhere. But are we telling people enough that it's not a very dangerous world outside there? There's an excellent abbreviation that I ran into. I am sure that you might have seen it even earlier, which is the answer is WMD, not the one that bothered the US president, not the weapons of mass destruction, but wash, mask, distance. If WMD is practiced by persons and you get that message across to people, and you actually flood them with pictures showing what is being done to promote safety in places that people use for staying, people use for traveling, etc. And then let people take their decisions. Now just look at it from the point of view of the average person. He or she has been sitting at home for 7 months or thereabouts. These are not people used to sitting at home. India has a lot of people that travel both abroad as well as domestically in terms of tourism. It is possible to promote tourism with some safeguards in place. It is possible to promote stays in hotels because safety factors are being addressed. But what I think needs to be done by the trade, by the industry associations, is get to the government saying, help us promote the message that things are not as bad as you think they are outside. So live your life carefully. Don't stop living your life. Don't stay at home with just the four walls sort of crowding in on you. There's only one life to live. Go and live it well. Go outside, stay safe. There are people who are taking risks. Rajdeep, let me share this with you if it helps anybody. I'm 73 years now, 73 going on 74. Not exactly a spring chicken. I'm fond of saying that I was born 3 months before India became independent. Not that I fought in the War of Independence, no, far from that. But I am the subject of all advisories that everybody has put out, from the government of India to the Gymkhana Club and the IIC. If you are over 65 years old, stay at home, don't come here, etc. I go to my office every day. I'm going this afternoon also to office. Am I sitting at home? I could work out of home. But I just want to give this message to the few people that work with me that, look, if I can come and I can work here, so long as your masks are in place, you wash your hands and you maintain a distance, nothing's going to hit you. Yes, we might lose a few people along the way, but I think we always lose a few people when we get into any kind of move in order to progress as a nation. The pioneers pay a price before the army, with the conquering armies go in, isn't it? Because they are the ones who have the things exploding beneath their feet. So it is true, there will be some price to be paid, even in terms of lives. But can we say we are unwilling to pay that price? Don't people die by sitting at home? Don't enough people die by slipping in the bathroom and hitting their head on the on some metallic piece or something else? So there is no zero risk situation in life. Take informed risks, and government must be in the forefront of promoting that.
I think that's very well put, and I think that's a good way to end today, because I think that element of positivity needs to come out both from government and indeed from all the stakeholders, a sense that unless you give that message that the glass is half full, the recovery is going to be that much more delayed. So I think informed risks is perhaps the way to reach out to the millions of people who actually want to go out and travel and want to sort of, in a way, enjoy their leisure time after a very difficult year. Thank you very much to all the panelists who've joined us. You've listed out the challenges, but also significantly also detailed the opportunities. And I think
1 minute.
from that point of view,
Rajdeep, one
So
minute, just
Ajit, why don't you give a vote of thanks at the
yes,
very end?
exactly. That's what I wanted to do. SIMA would like to thank especially Mr. Vikram Kapoor, IAS, Additional Chief Secretary and Secretary Tourism and Culture, Government of Tamil Nadu, for all his support. Thank you so much, sir. And special thanks, of course, to our keynote speaker, Mr. M. Damodaran, Chairperson of Excellence Enablers Private Limited, and former Chairman of SEBI. It was really enlightening, and I think you've given us hope for the future, sir. Thank you, Mr. Ajay Bakaya, MD of Sarovar Group of Hotels. Very enlightening talk, sir. And of course, Mr. Madhu Mathen, Executive Director in Flight Services Air India. He has shared some very good points with us. Of course, I have to also thank Mr. Venugopal, former MD of LIC and current Director of State Bank of India. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us because of power cut in his residence in Mumbai. We also specially thank Mr. Rajesh IAS, Commissioner of Tourism, Government of Tamil Nadu, and of course the Department of Tourism, especially for the gold sponsors for this seminar. I cannot leave this thanks without a very, very special thanks to my good friend Rajdeep, who has really taken time to be with us today. And amidst a lot of other compulsions, and you have guided us very well during these deliberations. Thank you so much, all of you, and to all the audience who've been patiently listening to us for almost 2 hours now. Thank you so much, and to all my colleagues in SIMA, thank you so much. Rajit, would you like to?
No, that's it. I think we can conclude there. There's nothing more to add to what you've said. It's been a pleasure and privilege talking to all of you this morning. I hope that the travel and tourism sectors put firmly on the roadmap to the future. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, SIMA will be back with another event, and we'll call you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One person has come down. One person has come out. Allow him.
Switch is offline.